Good evening, students. Today I will discuss with you on research methodology. Uh, I'm not teaching this paper. Once upon a time, I was teaching this paper to the MPhil students, but subsequently I uh, did not teach it due to various reasons. However, I have interest in research methodology uh, because uh, I always want to be a researcher. Uh, why? Because any seeker of knowledge must be a researcher. It is the research which produces the knowledge. Research basically means re and search. It means searching again and again. I mean, one if you search once, then if you are arriving at a conclusion, then you may not reach at the truth. So you have to search again and again. You have to test your search. You have to question your understanding, and thereby you can reach to a conclusion. And that conclusion is very much close to the truth. So basically, it is the research which manufactures the knowledge. And in an university is not a place of teaching. It is also a place of learning. Uh, so, I mean, not learning, researching, right? Teaching and learning are the same thing. So, university is a place of teaching and it is a place of researching as well. So, this research methodology is a very, very important course in the university system. And the way that without grammar you cannot learn English, like that, without research methodology, you cannot do research, you cannot produce knowledge, right? And without research, you will remain as a teacher only. So, the responsibility of university teachers is not only teaching but also producing the knowledge, producing, uh, the study materials. That is very important. So, uh, that's why I am interested, uh, you know, dealing with research methodology, right? So, what is this research? And today, let me make it very clear that today I will discuss what is research and the ethical consideration of research. Why ethics is important in the research. So, what is research? As I said, research means searching again and again, right? That means you have a problem, you have a question, and you are trying to find out the solution. So that's why you start searching the answer. You go through different literatures, you apply your mind, you check your thought, the overall uh, the function. I mean, whatever I describe, the overall function of a, I mean, of an individual like this is called research. Right. So, in a sense, we all are researchers. Uh, some people know that they are researcher, and some they don't know it that they are researcher. In fact, they have not realized it because every day we are stuck with some questions. You know, you may not be interested in questions, problems, but questions and problems are interested in you. So, in your everyday life, you face some questions, you try to look for answer. In some cases, you got uh, the answer, and in some cases, we don't get the answer. And when we don't get the answer, then we go into depth, or we go into the depth and locate our answer. For going in depth, we depend on resources. So basically means how to find the answers of your question, how to find the solution of the problem what you are facing. Right. Uh, Either the solution is there in your mind, or it is written somewhere, or it requires the both. I mean, the direct answer or the direct solution is not written, but something related to this solution of your question is written, and when you go through this solution, then you you apply your mind, then you get the solution. So you know resources, what in other words we call research methodology, that is very important. So sorry, in other words, what we call literature review, I'm sorry, what in other words we call literature review, that is very important. So in literature review, you try to find the solution of your problem, but you cannot find 100% solution in your literature review, but you find many close things that is uh, that is very much near to the answer, near to the solution of your problem, and that will that helps you to to search the answer. So that's why literature review, we do literature review in order to, so that later that literature review helps you to find the answer, to find the solution. So in a sense, in some situation uh, we get the answer, and in some situation uh, we have to do little hard work in order to find the answer. So overall, we all are researcher, or there is a researcher in us, right? And we can be researcher. What we do in our day-to-day life, or uh, in our day-to-day personal researching, it can prepare us to do the social research. What you do in your day-to-day life, I said you are doing research. And if you realize what you are doing, right, then that realization will help you, or will make you perfect doing social research. So doing social research means asking question, gaining knowledge, understanding the social world of which we are part. It is not it is not just simple description or common sense. Right. Often we encounter uh, you know currently the researcher in the university, you know though they are involved in research, but one can find from their presentation that as if they are giving simple description, or they are saying something which is related to the common sense. But research is not simple description. Research is not simple common sense. Research is something, research is discovering what is unknown, right? So in research, you move from known to unknown. So, what is known, you must know it, and you must apply your mind, and you must discover what is unknown. And once you discover what is unknown, then you are contributing to the knowledge. So, uh, the main purpose of research is contribution, or main purpose of research is contributing to the knowledge. So every researcher in their research, they should try how to contribute to the knowledge. That is very important. To contribute knowledge, if the researcher is having such a purpose, how to contribute to the knowledge, then that researcher follows the research guidelines, research ethics, and that researcher knows all the grammars of research, and that researcher must develop his you know intrinsic thinking. That researcher must become a, or must become a critical thinker. That researcher must ask questions, relevant question. That researcher must think and rethink about those questions. That researcher uh, you know will gain knowledge. He will become a seeker of knowledge. He will always try to understand the social world of which he is a part, right? So uh, you know that's how a student or an individual becomes a researcher. So basically, to become a researcher, you need to have critical faculty of mind. You need to be truthful and honest. I always used to tell to my students, and you should not take things easily. You should always ask a question, and you should always check with your own understanding. Whatever, the way you understand, you should always think and rethink about your understanding, and you should always you should be, more importantly, you should be a very good listener, right? And you should always uh, understand the other. Without listening, you cannot understand the other. So in that sense, to become, though a researcher is within us, but you know though a researcher is within us, but till we don't realize that researcher, we cannot be a researcher. So to become a researcher, uh, i mean it is not enough to realize that. And why it is not enough? Because you have to practice, or you should have all these qualities of a researcher. So gaining all these qualities are not easy. It is in fact very difficult. So that's why I said that even though there is a researcher in us, but it is very difficult to become a researcher. But if we try, we can become a researcher. And why we do research? We do research, in my description I said that we do research because we have a question to answer. We have a problem and we are searching a solution. And we do research because we are the seeker of knowledge. We want to acquire knowledge more and more. We are not satisfied, right? So there is no, you know, full stop to the knowledge. Knowledge is an ongoing process. So, till you are alive, the, gaining knowledge is not, or it will not be completed, right? So this gaining knowledge is a continuous process. And we do research because we want to extend our understanding of social world. I mean, here social world basically means society. You know, there is no person in this world who can say that his or her understanding of society is complete, right? So the more you think, the more you experience, the better understanding you can get on society. So doing research means understanding the society more and more. Doing research means finding the answer of your question, finding the solution of your problem. And doing research means acquiring knowledge and adding to the knowledge. And what is the characteristic of research? Now there are three components of research, and all these components of research, one can say that these are the three characteristics of research. The first component of research is the question type. You must ask a question, right? You must be troubled by a question. If you are not asking question, if you are not interested by the question, if you are not taking that question, then you cannot be a researcher. So a researcher always asks a question, a researcher always takes a question on him, a researcher always struggle with that question, a researcher always search the answer of that question. So question is a very important part of research. Then the research process. I mean, the research, this research process is in fact a very complex and perhaps the main focus of research methodology. Now you have a question and you have to find the answer, and how you will come or how you will convert your question into answer. You can convert your question into answer through the research process, and this research process is the main focus of research methodology. In research methodology, we know the research process. This process helps you to understand the question and it helps you to find out the answer. So the three components of research is or are question, research process, and answer. Right. Now let's understand what is the nature of research and what is not the nature of research. The first nature of research is the research must be purposeful. Research must be purposeful. It means the researcher must have a purpose. When the researcher is gathering the data, collecting the data, the researcher must have a purpose and the researcher must be guided by his purpose. And when the researcher is interpreting the data, then the researcher should not forget the purpose of research. And the second nature of research is research must be rigorous. Here rigorous means strictly and carefully planned and conducted. So a researcher must be strict to himself. The researcher must be careful while planning the research and while conducting the research. And the fourth nature of research is research should be robust and defensible. It means the researcher must be strong in all elements. The researcher must ask the strong question. Researcher must have the strong desire to find the answer of that question. The researcher must know strongly about research methodology. Researcher must use the strong methods of data collection. Researcher must use the strong methods of data interpretation, and researcher must be strong while concluding. Researcher should not justify himself, rather than researcher should be self-critical. A researcher must tell that what are the demerits, what are the defects of his or her research. and what are the possibilities, or what are the uh, researcher must show path to the subsequent researcher, that what the subsequent researcher should do on that topic on which the researcher is doing research. And the fourth nature of research is research must be systematic. That means uniformity must be followed. That means uh, the title must be justified by the chapters. Each sentence must be systematically connected. Each paragraphs must be systematically connected. Each chapters must be systematically connected. And the conclusion must be derived from your preceding chapters. And overall, all these chapters must justify the title of your research. So these are the nature of research. What is not the nature of research? So research is not simply the gathering of information or facts, and research should not be diverged from the practical life. You know, we do research. It is because it is needed for individual life. It is related with the practical life of the individual. So if you are unable to connect your research with the practical life of the individual, then you are not a researcher. So let me take 2 minutes break, then I'm coming back. Welcome back. So after knowing the nature of research, I mean, let's understand the quality of research. That is very important. So while discussing the nature of research, I indicated, how significant the quality of research is. If research is not a qualitative, if research is not qualitatively nice, if it is not a quality research, then it is better not to do any research. This will be the waste of time, waste of money, and waste of energy. Now, how to understand the quality of research? It is the rigorous and robust. I told rigorous means strictly and carefully planned and conducted. When the researcher strict to himself, researcher is careful while conducting the research, while planning the research. That is known as the rigorousness. And robust means the research must be strong in all element, right? Now this rigorous and robust nature of research determine the quality of research. The quality of research depends, how we will know the research is qualitatively good or satisfactory. Now when the research is written in such a way that it become accessible to appropriate audience. So the research is a good research if the appropriate audience of your research understand it, access it, right? Here I can say that, uh, you know, I should not tell it, but I think being a teacher, a teacher should be truthful and honest, and without having any, political orientation in my mind. I am saying how important uh, to keep the appropriate audience in your research. You are doing research, you are presenting your research, you are facing your viva, but can you say that those who are listening to you, they are the appropriate audience? Right? You cannot say it because in audience there is heterogeneity in audience, not that the appropriate audience are listening to you. But one thing we can do that, the committee that guides the researcher, that committee must have one or two expert uh, on the topic the researcher is doing, right? Because those experts are the appropriate audience of the research conducted by the researcher. I mean, the committee which is checking the research of the researcher, that committee must have the appropriate audience. That's why in regulation we give importance on experts, right? The committee must have experts who can understand the research and who can help the researcher conducting his research. So that appropriate audience is very, very important. I mean, if you are doing a qualitative or quality research, and if the appropriate audience of your research, they say that it is qualitatively good, then one can say that this is, I mean, your research is a quality research. Right. Then the second point, how to know a research is qualitative or qualitative, it's a wrong word. Qualitative is something else. Your research is a quality research or not. Now, if the research design clearly addresses the research question, right? If your research question guides your research designing, then it is a quality research. Third, if you are maintaining transparency in data collection and data analysis, then it is a quality research. If a clear statement of how the research process is conducted, I mean, if the researcher is clearly making a statement of how the research process is conducted, if that researcher is very clear, then it is a quality research, because researcher understand every aspect of the research. I mean, fifth, if the research makes contribution to the knowledge, then it is a quality research. Many research in India, if you see and critically engage with it, you will find that many research do not contribute to the knowledge, right? So I said, five things to ensure the quality of research. First, the appropriate audience must understand your research, must certify your research. Research design must be guided by the research question. Researcher must maintain transparency in data collection and data analysis. A clear statement of research process must be written by the researcher. And last, if the research contributes to the knowledge, then we can say that it is a quality research. Now, research quality is checked by four key concepts. There are four concepts through which one can check the research quality. And these four key concepts are reliability, first, second, validity, third, generability, and fourth, ethical practice. So let me take 1 minute break, coming back. welcome back. So, how to check the research quality? We can check research quality through the yardstick called reliability, through the yardstick called validity, and through the yardstick called generability, generalizability, generalizability, and fourth, through the yardstick of ethical consideration. So, what is reliability? Reliability basically means it is the trust on your research. I mean, the research what a researcher has conducted, to what extent it is trustworthy. Now, it is known when your research is asked the question. I mean, if this question is asked to your research, what is this question? Can my result be replicated by other researcher by using the same research technique? I mean, the research what I do, the technique what I used, the field work what I have done, if it is done by the other individual, same topic, same methodology, same field work, same technique, right? And if the other researcher says the same things what is said by me, then I will say that my research is trustworthy because it is also found by the other researcher. In science, we may expect exact result because science students they work with controlled variable. But in social science, we cannot expect the same result. I mean, the researcher 1 and the researcher 2 having all the same things, but they cannot, in the conclusion, they cannot say the same thing, but they can say the similar thing, right? So in social science, we don't expect the same result, but we expect the similar result. So reliability strengthens the consistency of a research and provides scope for the scrutiny of other. I mean, if your research is reliable, then you should not hesitate to provide the scope to the others to scrutiny it, right? If you are, I mean, if your research is trustworthy, then you will ask other researcher to scrutiny your research, to find the defects of your research. So this is what the reliability is all about. The second is the validity. Now validity is known when your research is asked this question. What is the question? Am I researching the things that I think I am? I mean, whatever I am researching, am I really doing research on that? Or I'm thinking something and I'm doing something? Are the data that I am gathering relevant to my research question or not? Right. So many times, researcher is lost in the field. Researcher does not know what he thinks and what he does. And researcher is overconfident that what he is doing right thing. Researcher is overconfident. So that's why the researcher must be in confusion that what I am thinking, am I doing it or not? And what I am doing, is it really according to my thinking or not? So the researcher must put a question mark to his thinking and to his doing, and that helps the researcher to uh, pass his research uh, to pass his research from the question of validity, right? So here the researcher needs to be very much conscious about the data because the researcher is doubting that data, researcher is not confident about the data, researcher is thinking, rethinking about the data whatever the researcher is collecting, whether that data is appropriate to his research question or he is collecting a different data. So basically the researcher is skeptical about his thought and action, and this skepticalness of the researcher, you know, it strengthen the validity of the research of of the researcher, right? So here researcher needs to be very conscious about the data he gathers. The researcher is conscious about the data interpretation. The researcher has to see whether these data are responding to the research question or not, right? So basically validity means being skeptical over one's own thought and action, right? And the third is the generalizability. Now it is known when your research is asked this question. And what is the question? How far am I able to claim that the results or findings of my research are true or relevant to the wider population and different contexts? I mean, I cannot, as a researcher, I cannot do research on micro entity. I do research in macro entity or with micro entity, and in the end of my research, I universalize the finding of my research to a larger entity, macro entity. So I am doing research in micro entity, but I am generalizing the finding of my research for a macro entity, right? So there I must put this question to myself: can I say that the finding of my research is applicable to the larger audience, or the finding of my research is applicable to my, the finding of my research is applicable to my context only? So is it limited to the context, or is it having a larger, uh, you know, uh, larger impact over the macro, context? So at this stage, the researcher sees whether his sample is representing the population or not. So when the conclusion, when the research on a micro entity will represent the macro entity, now only when, the samples what the researcher has taken from the macro entity, right? If the sample is representing the population, if the sample is representing the population, then the finding of micro entity will represent the macro entity. If the sample is not representing the population, then the finding of the micro entity will not represent the macro entity. And the last point is the ethical practice or ethical consideration, that is also very important to maintain the, to check whether uh, your research is a quality research or not. Now it is known when your research is asked this question: have I given full consideration to the way I behave as a researcher with respect to other human beings who are involved in my research? That basically means, I mean, have you used the other human being as an instrument of your research. Now, as a researcher, either you will become a human to your respondents, or your respondents will just a instrument of your research, right? So research ethics always tell to the researcher to become a human to the others who are involved in your research. Research ethics always want the researcher not to think the others as an instrument of his research. In qualitative research, the research behavior is always at the question. I mean, even if the researcher is researcher is saying truth, researcher is honest. In qualitative research, there are two kinds of research: quantitative research and qualitative research. In quantitative research, there are data, there are some mathematical principle, statistical principle. You apply that, and you are absolutely value free. Hence, you don't claim, I mean, about your truth. So the statistic, the mathematics, that prove, there is nothing from your side to justify whether you are right or wrong. But in qualitative research, since data, mathematical principles, statistical principles is not used, here the researcher has to justify his truth and honesty. And many times we see in the qualitative research, the honesty is always at the question. There is possibility that people may distrust it, but the researcher must not lose his neutrality, honesty, and impartiality. That means even if you are honest, you are truthful in your research, especially in qualitative research, but there is always a doubt to the researcher. However, the researcher should not take this doubt seriously. The researcher must not lose his neutrality, honesty, and impartiality. So, as I mentioned, all these four are very important to check the research quality. If your research is a quality research, then your research must pass all these four tests. The test of reliability, test of validity, test of generalizability, and the test of ethical consideration. So I'm stopping here. In the next class on research methodology, I will deal with uh, the research as a ethical and cultural value, or uh, you know ethical consideration in research. So thank you and good night to all of you.